So this time-lapse footage is a little shorter than the last painting, so I'm going to use some freeze frames here to talk over so that I have time to kind of explain things a little bit better. So I started with a background here that was using a burnt sienna and Portland gray light, I believe, if I'm gambling. And basically just washing it in to defeat the white canvas to have some sort of background starting point. I'm using raw umber, burnt umber, indigo blue, and Naples yellow. The indigo blue and Naples yellow are mostly used to uh, make the colors a little darker and cooler, or lighter and warmer. And I'm really laying in this oil wash thin over this background, so it's thinned down with turpentine and just refining the drawing, so to speak, and letting things happen, letting runs and drips go down, and then going in and detailing some things, like as you can see, some of the hands and weapons in their hands. Okay, next I'm just going to start solidifying the painting and painting in, as you can see, sleeve there, setting up the spatial relationships. I'm kind of approach most paintings as landscape paintings, and I'm creating a sense of depth by using an atmospheric perspective, and really what that means is that things that are farther away tend to be more faded and cooler, and things that are closer tend to be more contrasted and dark. And the cooler or warm is really comparing to what the background is. So if your background, like in this case, is really these strong oranges and yellows and really warm colors, the things that are going to recede into space are going to be closer to that color. And the things that are closer to you in space are going to be usually a complementary color or a darker or cooler color. And that will give you a sense of foreground and background just by creating a difference in relationships between the subject and the background in the painting. And a lot of the rest of this painting is really just a continuation of that, just really trying to define foreground and background, front and back, and refining the shapes and keeping the overall tone of the painting together. So a lot of times I'm not really exactly sure what I'm trying to achieve. I mean, I have some basic sketches which I started off in this painting, but how it ultimately turns out is kind of a mystery to me. So I start with this background. This background, as you can see, is obviously influencing the direction of the color palette. And you know, if I were to use a blue background, this painting would have been probably more bluish color. So I'm using a grayed down version of cadmium yellow medium, I believe, to create the lighter color in the top part of the sky in the background. And I'm using a gray rather than a white. I suppose you could mix the gray with black and white, but I like to use pre-mixed grays from Gambling. I don't keep talking about these gambling colors, but I really love them. And so I'm going through the painting, trying to describe the structure and form of this horse here, and making sure that the anatomy is right. And I don't paint a lot of horses, so I kind of have to like figure some things out. And the references that I have don't have this sort of extended head. I'm kind of exaggerating this. The one thing about distortions and exaggerations on figures or animals or biological things is that they still have to make some sort of biological sense. Like the hands still have to have bones and structures in them, and people have to work the same way. So you can distort them as much as you want, but they still have to be, they still have to seem like they work in some sort of reality. So I've changed the direction of this head. It was too low, it was stretched out, and it wasn't natural. And like I often do, when I see what's wrong with it and I figure out how to fix it, I just do it. So those runs and drips look kind of cool, but what they do visually is really stop your eye, and this painting has a really solid flowing movement from right to left and back and forth that way. And I just felt that those didn't make a lot of sense in what was happening in the story of this painting. And so I'm going around and making the background a little more yellow, and what that does is it creates a more of an environment, I think, that more of an atmosphere, like there's a certain it could be clouds or something in the background, and that helps, I think, connect the character inside of an environment rather than just being silhouetted. And then I'm going back and really trying to push and pull this character, like I said, about landscape painting, so trying to create this sense of depth, and also using some of these tones to work through the painting, bringing in some of these oranges and warmer tones as backlighting and underlighting, like under the coat and on the back of the shoulder and in the hair and under the brim of the hat. It's not really naturalistic, but I think it looks cool, and ultimately, I want it to feel like interesting. It's almost more important to me that something evokes a feeling more than it does describe the surface details. And so here I'm going back and knocking back the far arm. So now if you look at my palette, I have a mixture of colors. I have the grays on the right side, and I have all the yellows moving over to the warms and earth tones in the left corner. So to knock back and space this far arm, I'm using a mixture of raw sienna, yellow ochre, and cadmium yellow light or medium. And these colors, so the raw sienna and the yellow ochre tend to gray down the yellow, like the cadmium yellows. The cadmium yellows are very, very vivid. So I'm not using really any white. I might use a touch of some of the gambling gray, medium or light, whichever is the closest to that value of how light or dark those pistils are. But what I'm doing is I'm knocking back the perception of space by making them cooler, grayer, and lighter all at the same time. So painting is about describing the way light is perceived through our mind, I suppose. And so I'm there's underlight, reflective light under the sleeves on both the background and the foreground sleeve, and I'm using the rest of this painting really just describing the form and structure and creating the sense of space in this limited scope of space. So we're not having a vast, far off mountain. So we're not going to have that sort of depth of space, but we can create that illusion by creating the same sorts of, using the same sorts of principles. I finished this painting by really just redefining the background, and the background is obviously sky. So the way that skies work as far as landscape painting is that things that are at the horizon tend to be lighter and warmer, and they get warmer, or they get darker and cooler as they go up. And they're lighter and warmer as they get closer to the source of light, and cooler and darker as they move away. We're nearing the end of this painting, so if any of you guys have questions about the things I've discussed here, or have other questions about things I didn't cover, please feel free to let me know.